And you better put it into practice. Okay. Okay. All right. So before we start, and let me just tell you a little bit of a story about connecting. And some of you may have heard it before, but connecting is so important these days in the world that we live in, where everybody's communicating, right? People are talking. You have cell phone. You have social media. But let me tell you how I communicated and connected with one of somebody who actually became a very good friend of mine. It was about a couple of years ago in December when I went shopping at No Frills, and I went to buy some flour because I wanted to do some baking. And when you see flour, and if it's on sale, will you pick up the small or you'll pick up the 10 pound? Obviously the 10 pound, right? And I rushed in there thinking, I'm just going to pick up the flour and run out. But when I went there and picked up the 10 pound, I obviously didn't have a cart to put it in, and I couldn't carry it. So as I was paying for it, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed this lady pushing her cart, and she only had a few items in it. So I thought to myself, I definitely cannot take this cart to the parking lot, this bag to the parking lot, because it's too heavy for me to carry. So I said, excuse me, can I borrow your cart for this bag of flour? So she looked at me suspiciously and she said, okay. So I used her cart, and as we walked through from the store to the parking lot, I started asking her questions. I found out that she was pregnant, she had just come to Canada, she was an overseas student over here, and she didn't drive, and she worked just in the next building from where I work. So after that, I kept talking to her, and then I said, you know what, I'll pick you up tomorrow on my way to work. And so after that, I started picking her up, and we started going to work and coming back together. And that's how I made that friend called Stacy, who actually turned out to be a really good friend of mine. So look at that. You connect with people over the funniest things, right? And so that's what we're going to learn today, is how connection can really take you a long way. So thank you for being here today, and I'm hoping to add some value today through the things that John talks about in this book, which I'm actually really excited about, because I'm all about connecting with people, and that's what I'm sure all of you realize is the backbone of communication today, correct? So moving on, connecting is the ability to influence people and relate to them, to identify with them and relate to them, that increases your influence with them. Because leadership is about influence, nothing more and nothing less, correct? So communicating with people and actually connecting with them will increase your influence with them, and all of us want that, correct? So I just told you a story about Stacy, how I connected with her. But this book really has 5 principles and 5 practices. Those are mentioned on your handout, so you don't have to take notes about that. But the principles that John mentions are: connecting increases your influence in every situation. Connecting is all about others. Connecting goes beyond words. And then connecting always requires energy. Connecting is more skill than talent. And we're going to go through these 5 principles as we get on with the presentation. But these 5 principles of connecting are also going hand in glove with 5 practices. And those 5 practices are: connectors connect on common ground. They do the difficult work of keeping it simple. They create an experience everyone enjoys. They inspire people, and they live what they communicate. Once again, it's all in your handout, these 5 principles and 5 practices. Okay, so but let's go to the first. Connecting increases your influence in every situation. Now, let's look at, so let's look at how many people have met people for the first time and you're a little awkward. What are the questions that you ask them? You don't want to be too nosy, but at the same time you want to get to know them a little bit better, right? So some of the first time questions that you will ask, when you're genuinely interested in people, then you're going to ask those first time questions so that you're connecting with them. So I know in social circles, sometimes at parties and things like that, you feel a little bit awkward. But when you become a good connector with people, you learn how to genuinely ask those questions so that people will respond. Okay, so first time questions. And how many of you have met people for the first time, connected with them, and you found that over a period of time, that really helped pay dividends for you? I'll give you a little story how I met somebody at a nails place where I was doing my nails. And we just got talking. You know, women, when they are at these places, they usually chat and things like that. So I asked her questions, hey, where do you live? And I found out that she was big into health and wellness. Her name was Mire, and she had a son, and you know, she came from Egypt originally. And we just got talking, and then I had a health and wellness online business, and she became my customer to buy vitamins from me, just because we connected that way. A few years later, I found that I forgot to ask her where she exactly lived after all those first time questions. I found that she just lived 2 doors away from me. And when I and my husband and I had to sell our house and move into a rental property in 2014, that's when I found that she was actually giving up her house for rent because they were moving to a bigger home. And we connected that way, and because of that connection that made so many years ago, Mire actually became my landlady, and I didn't have to move out of the area. My son could still go to the same school simply because, and we found a rental property at her house, simply because I connected with her by asking those first few questions over that nail place. So don't be afraid, don't be shy. You know, people really want you to ask them questions. They want you to get to know them better. So that was an example of how I made a connection that actually paid me dividends later, right? So that's what I would encourage you to keep connecting with people so that you can increase their influence. We find some people in the corporate world or in the business world that, you know, they struggle sometimes with connecting. But people who actually do connect and with their team are the high achievers. And here we're going to see a little bit of a comparison between high achievers, average achievers, and, you know, people who are just, you know, just struggling all the time to achieve. So what are the high achiever will care about people as well as the profits bottom line. The average achiever will concentrate just on the production side of it, okay? The low achievers are preoccupied with their own security. In other words, they couldn't really be bothered to connect with anybody else on their team, okay? High achiever views subordinates optimistically. What that means is that they look at their team member and they say, you know what, they have potential. Let me send them for this course and that course. Let me encourage their leadership. So that's what they do. The average achievers focus more on their own status. So they're inwardly focused on what they can progress in their career. The low achievers show a basic distrust of subordinates. Okay, you do find there are certain people that don't trust anybody, including the people on their team. The high achievers seek advice from those under them. So they're always in that learning posture. Okay, and that's why they're connecting with people. The average achievers are reluctant to seek advice from people under them. And then the low achievers do not seek advice from anybody whatsoever. The high achievers actively listen. The average ones listen only to superiors or to the bosses or people from, you know, higher up. And then the low achievers avoid communication and rely mainly on policy manuals. So when you see a comparison of the high achievers, you know, let's all try and, you know, we all want to learn and grow so that we are a high achiever in the organization, right? So that's what connecting with people is going to teach us, right? The next slide. Connecting principles is all about others and not ourselves. Okay, that's the trick, is that communication should be outwardly focused and not inwardly. You know, so many of us, when we get up to speak in front of people for the first time, we think, you know what do they think about me? You know what, they're judging me. Actually, let me tell you a secret. people don't really care too much about you. They're, they're, right? They're mostly concerned about themselves. So, right? So that's why I always say, when you're talking in front of people, you know what, forget about yourself. So what? Yes, first impressions are important, but people are more concerned about them sitting down there in the audience like it's you, right? So it's all about you. That's why connecting is all about others and not ourselves. Why do we focus on ourselves so much and not others? What is the reason? Sometimes it's immaturity. We don't know ourselves too well. We don't have confidence in our strengths and in our abilities. And so in our immature thinking, we think, you know what, we're not good enough, so let us get better. And then that's why we're scared, okay, to communicate. So immaturity. Maturity is the ability to see and act on behalf of others. So now when I'm looking at, Lorne, and I'm looking at Kamna, and I'm looking at Ashwin, I'm saying, what are they going to get from this? What value can I give to them? Rather than thinking about, hey, am I being projected in the right light? So maturity, it comes from practice, but it is the ability to see and act on behalf of others. Ego. Unfortunately, sometimes, our ego, which everybody has an ego, it's the basic human trait, but sometimes we allow that ego then to be, it's all about me, right? And unfortunately, sometimes we do live in a narcissistic society where it's all about me, it's the selfie, it's look at me, and so very often people find it a little difficult to focus and put that light on others. So that could be one of the reasons.